Hello and welcome back to another devlog. This is number 47, and this is an overview of all that I've done so far in the level. It's starting to grow rather large. I started with this one room, and this is the first floor all the way here. And this is what I've been working on recently, scene number 2. Going down the staircase, the basement, floor 1, down here. I built a little tool to kind of take the scenes and layer them like a stack of pancakes, so you actually see the whole thing when you want to. Pretty soon there'll be about 4 more floors the size of this first one on top of it. So we'll keep going. So essentially, I did all that work and let's hide that. This new scene is what I was working on this week. This first section here, these 3 hallways, is one sector, and that's what I was working on the beginning of the week. Doing the usual process, pretty straightforward, following the process. I have these, I was able to fix the checklist tool and organize a little better to where I abstracted the base class, and now I'm able to set up different checklists for different processes, repeatable processes. So there's like, the first step of setting up the sector, and then other things. So I can create a indefinite number of checklists for like the second stage of creating the sector and go through that. So on Monday I did that. On Tuesday I was able to finish up the details, putting all the details as usual. And I was working on the dual staircase. So the interesting part about this, for my prototype last week of getting scene transitions working, now I had to get it working to where there's actually 2 staircases. So this is where my init logic, really the rubber hits the road. So you can go up this staircase or down this staircase, and you have to appear in this area here on the top level, and then if you go down this staircase, so this other area, you have to appear on this other side of the level. So it has to load the scene, and it has to load the right init vcam correctly. So my logic held up, it worked, and I was able to get that working as you saw in the demo. So after that, I was having a bit of issue with shadows and lighting again. For this room, I imported a bunch of assets from the start room, and I had optimized that for these to use like mixed lights, and I was getting this warning like there's too many shadows. URP is not going to process these shadows, but so to get rid of that warning, I was like, okay. Lighting and shadows is still, I wouldn't say it's fuzzy, but it's always something that it's just so complicated, and so it's not an easy concept to understand, like the intricacies. You have to do a lot of testing to truly understand how the unit system behaves and treats shadows and how to optimize for it. And through all my testing, I understand how to employ shadows in an optimized way. So getting these warnings, I went back to my testing scene. I had an idea. I was like, oh, maybe I can use mixed lighting to solve my little problem having dynamic lighting for the real-time lighting for the character, and direct bake lighting for all the other objects. And So I tried mixed lighting to see if that did anything, and it actually didn't do anything. It didn't bake in any direct shadows, lighting shadows like I thought. So that was a no-go. But just keep testing it if you think you can get it to work. But it's still the same formula. But what I would say for this area here, this is a kind of like a prime example of where baked lighting can be useful because it can bake in the direct lighting for these objects because the dynamic there's no dynamic interaction because you can't get into this room and you can't cast your player's dynamic shadow alongside with the baked shadow and see any sort of issues. So this is a case where baked direct lighting would be useful for optimization. So I just temporarily fixed this by to say, fixing the shadows for this room and my problems in a way. So I'll fix that later. That's in the second stage detail pass where I go and make sure that the lighting is optimized for each sector. So that was Wednesday. What else? Checklist tool. So on Thursday, I started in on this next room here, this next sector. So another small sector. It's just one room, very simple. Each time I do this, I tried a new confiner methodology, and I was able to get the confiner methodology actually works a little bit better for larger rooms. Like if you're doing like an oblong room like this, that's oddly shaped, but it doesn't have a lot of width. A custom poly shape confiner doesn't really do it much good. But here you can actually you can do a mesh collider, and if you actually define the bounds, like instead of on the outside and the inside, if it actually I think it's better than just using the box collider. So just improving upon that. It's like each time you do it, try to test something new and see if you can do it better next time. But again, standard process, putting in the walls, putting in the, just creatively putting in the assets like before. And, every time I do a new detail room, I like to go into my asset inventory and kind of think, go review it and see if I can do anything new. Because I don't want these rooms to all kind of look the same and get kind of stale. So each new room that I detail, I kind of like to try something different. So this one has more servers, more wires, this and that. I think, it's good for a first detail pass. So got that detail, and then, yeah, got that room pretty much done. And then I started on this next one, which is even smaller room. So this went much quicker, the process. I got the everything sorted and moved the walls up. But then I got to the detail phase, and that was probably around Friday. And at that point, I was kind of like, okay, I'm gonna detail this room, but all the way along, each time I like to go back to my asset library and just kind of, review it one more time and see if I can get any new ideas of how to, decorate this room in a new way that I kind of haven't done before. So I wanted to see if I could expand my asset library. So I do that each time, add a few more things. But I ended up browsing on the Unity store, and there was a package of enemies that I purchased. A little bit of a waste because I purchased a couple of them that were already included. You don't really get a discount on that, but I got all the enemies that I was wanting for a while. It's gonna be great. It's more like a cyborg themed package or whatever, but most importantly, I spent a few bucks on a couple more environmental assets packages. So now I have a much wider selection of wall and floor assets. So for the next scene, I kind of wanna change it up. I've been using this floor and these walls for a while. I kind of wanna maybe get a new floor tile prefab or something like that, and just so it's a little bit different for the next floor. It'll be fine for the first two floors, but this one, um, also, add a few more wall prefabs and whatnot. So I spent a bunch of time looking at the demo scenes, and I was adding a directional light to see the assets much better. I found that in some of my asset packs, they had examples of assets using different materials and different colors. So instead of taking an asset that was like, I don't know, white or something that kind of didn't match the color or the theme I was going for, you can spend time, fine tuning it and creating your own custom asset out of it, like by adjusting the base materials color property. But instead, I went into their package and they had done a bunch of custom stuff, but they didn't bother uh, the convenience of saving each one of those custom ones to its own prefab for easy use. So they would make these wall prefabs and they'd add a custom prop or two to kind of make it look different. Kind of like what I did with this one. I made my own. I just took this one and added a few more, like a combination, and that itself is a new wall prefab. So I went in the demo scenes and I looked at things that were not currently in my library, and I made prefabs out of those, just to get a variation on walls, a wider variation on walls. And I had to figure out how to export them into the project directly, because you can't just drag from like a folder from one project to the other and then get a prefab, because some of the child prefabs were missing and it wasn't right. So I had to select all the dependencies and export those, and that did the trick. But at the same time, it kind of broke some of my existing prefabs. These will be shifted out of place. Nothing too terrible, but some issues. But another issue I found in the process, it imported dependencies, but it overrode a lot of my custom system logic, like for Invector and stuff. So when I went to go and play this for the demo, everything was broken. There was like the whole project was just full of errors, and I had to figure out how to revert these changes. But the problem is I made him commit with all these changes, and I didn't want to lose my work for building this little area here and other things that I've done. So I'm surprised I haven't really done this before. I haven't really figured it out. But one of the important things in version control is being able to do a merge, but like a subtractive merge. And I was working in the desktop app they provide, and it's funny because I've attempted this before, but never really. I kind of gave up. But like, it's like you can see the change set, but there's no way to actually say, delete this from a revision or whatever. Not from this app. I don't know what's up with it, but I just couldn't figure out how to revert each file and then do a new commit. But the funny thing is that you can actually, if you go in here in the Unity editor plugin, from here you can select this and say revert this file to previous revision, and that will kill the changes. So I just reverted a bunch of the CS files that changed that I didn't want to change, and I was able to get this all recompiled and working again, and everything just working, for the demo to actually move up and down the stairs, and as you saw. But yeah, pretty straightforward. Other than that, like I said, the next after this room's done, which shouldn't take long, it's on to the next scene. So the next floor, which is it'll be connecting from this stairwell here, and pretty much it'll be like floor 2 on top of this floor. And that's about at the same size as this first floor, so that's going to take much longer. This whole new scene only took about a week, but I can imagine the next scene is going to take a lot longer than that. And from reviewing the demo scenes, I got a bunch of new ideas on how to change it up for the next scene. I got to keep the environment fresh and evolving, so I came up with this concept of like I kind of did it here, but I'm realizing there's this in my layouts and my scene layouts. There's this concept of like prime real estate, and that really, prime viewing real estate where you can actually, since the camera is always at an angle, that means these areas out here are exposed to the edge to view, like vistas or whatever you want to put through there. So, um, not so much on the interiors, but on the exteriors, and this is where you want to take advantage of like, you know, artistic kind of embellishments, kind of like how I did down here with the larger windows, so you could see something. But essentially, these prime real estate areas, this wall wouldn't be blocking anything, and probably this floor wouldn't be blocking anything, and you can see stuff down and beyond from this camera angle. And it also kind of works in reverse. Another idea is that what you have is like, you have a room, but this edge cut out, you're walking along here, and then you can see maybe some machinery or something out here. It's like a wide view foreground. Um, so a lot of different things that I could do, and really kind of I got to keep that creative dynamicism through the design of the levels going forward, because I can't fall into this pattern. It's all about breaking up patterns. And if the levels start to all look the same after a while, like yeah, there has to be some sort of difference and change in between the levels. So um, I'm gonna have to, it's a real creative process. And the similar design lasts for a while, but like I don't think my whole level can look exactly like how it's been. The level has evolved ever since the first room. It's sort of remained in the same theme, but ever since then I've added more tips and tricks and different processes in order to really add a variety of different elements to the levels. But that's pretty much all I have for this week, and we will keep on chugging along for next week. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you later.